And hello and welcome to How I Read a Chart. My name is Anthony Picco. I'm an astrologer with about 30 years of experience. And the goal of this particular lecture is to discuss a step-by-step look on the way that I find my way into a natal astrology chart, into the head and heart of the person I'm reading. Because it's one thing to sit down and you open up and there's all these planets on a piece of paper. And how do you choose what's more important? How do you build a person out of what's there? And we're going to look at two charts today. And the first chart, well, let's go right to the first chart. Let's see if I can go to the first chart. Hold on. There we go. Hopefully you can all see a chart. It's listed A. I redraw all my charts. I do that partially because it's my way of getting to know them. I am a graphic designer, so I like drawing stuff. But it's one of the first ways I get to know the chart, by writing everything. And I always do the aspectarian by hand. I don't use what comes right off the computer. I figure it out myself because it's a way of sort of getting drawn into the chart and watch what's going on. And here's the step-by-step way. The first thing I always do is I check, I highlight the sun and the moon and the rising sign, which are the holy three when you first want to look at a chart. This is a big part of a chart. And here we can just look, the information we're just getting from these three things. This person has their sun in Pisces, their moon is in Cancer, and their rising sign is in Aquarius. And the sun in Pisces, just by itself, very empathetic. Maybe sometimes they give away too much. They can give away the whole store. But I look and his moon is in Cancer, so he's got a nice kind of selfish quality emotionally. And selfish is not a bad word, but he's able to hold on to his emotions. That's a good sign for somebody with the sun in Pisces. And he's got kind of a cool intellectual quality up front with his rising sign being in Aquarius. So we've got somebody that's fairly emotional, yet is able to not get swept away by them, I would believe, and is able to present a rational quality up front also. And the next thing I do is I start circling conjunctions, because I always consider them fairly important. I'm going to start at the top. Anything conjunct an angle, the nadir, the midheaven, the ascendant and descendant, is, I consider, extremely important. It adds a lot of weight to that particular planet. So we have Uranus on the midheaven. We're talking an unusual career. We're talking in Sagittarius, an expansive career. And so we've got that quality going on in there. We're just looking at the conjunctions now. We go over to the right. He's got Saturn conjunct Jupiter. Saturn conjunct Jupiter is always a positive thing. It's always about steady growth. It's about careful growth, measured growth. Expansion comes, but it doesn't expand too fast. But neither does Saturn get to sit on its hands and feet and do nothing. So there's a quality of like pushing forward in a careful, measured way. And the other conjunction going on in this chart, which is pretty important, the sun is conjunct Venus and the sun is conjunct Mars. And even though Venus and Mars in my particular book they're a little too far apart to be conjunct, I call this stellium guilt by association. They're all conjunct because they're both conjunct the sun, and they kind of get drawn in together. And this is going to be important here. We've got Venus conjunct the sun. He's going to be able to be a charming person, a person that's able to communicate, a person who's attractive, a person who's likable in some level. And even though Mars is right there, and usually Mars conjunct the sun is a bit can be a bit aggressive, it's in Pisces. So this is a very gentle aggressiveness. This is almost a persuasive aggressiveness, kind of a coaxing a person along to get them to do something. So it's forward and yet not in a particularly off-putting kind of a way. So got a very sensitive person, got a lot of growth going on, an unusual career, and yet he's got an intellectual, analytical side. So the next thing I do is using colored pens actually, I put in the so-called harmonious aspects. And oh boy, here we go. We've got a grand trine. So we've got moon trine, sun, always a nice connection. Your inner and outer selves are working well together. A person with sun trine moon is usually fairly confident. It doesn't mean they're always right, but they don't worry over stuff a lot. They figure it out and they decide, this is what I'm going to do. Then they go forward and do it. And the other nice thing about this particular trine is they're both tapped into Uranus. So there's hopefully a flexibility and an open-mindedness in the way they think and they feel. And actually, as long as you're dragging in Venus and Mars, you've got unusual action. Mars trining Uranus, and Venus, an unusual way of relating that flows well. So he can be kind of offbeat and yet and still flow very well. The nice thing too about this grand trine, it's all of it's approaching. Uranus may already be out of the element, the same element. It's in a fire sign, but it's going retro and it's heading back into water. And the sun at 24 degrees Pisces is moving toward the trine with Uranus, and the moon is also moving forward to the trine with the sun and Uranus. So you have all these planets are approaching each other. So it's a beginning to form grand trine. The other trine going on in his chart is Pluto trining Mercury. So his Mercury is in the first house. This man is going to talk a lot. It is a man. I happen to know it's a man. But it's not going to be just casual conversation. It's not going to be like gossip or what's the weather like. Pluto's kind of coming in with the idea that there's going to be depth to his conversation. Pluto trine Mercury is often about, almost to a certain degree, a detective-like quality about a person. It's in Aquarius, so it's going to be a little lighter than that intense emotional side. But so he's got an inquisitive mind, he's charming, he's able to talk, he's able to be interesting, and now we're going to add the so-called difficult aspects. Okay, so 2 difficult aspects. Neptune is squaring the by degree exactly the sun, but of course dragging in Venus and Mars. At its worst, a square from Neptune can be a little over idealistic, perhaps a little too fantasy-based, perhaps a little too emotive, but he is a Pisces, so he's kind of comfortable with Neptune to start with on some level. The biggest issue here is he might be a little too idealistic and get a little too carried away with stuff. But it's also, again, I always look for the escape route out of a difficult aspect. So Neptune squares into that stellium, the stellium bounces out into the grand trine. So as long as he keeps himself in that grand trine, he should be able to incorporate Neptune fairly well. And the same thing with a bit more of a difficult square on the other side of the chart. The moon is squaring Pluto, which can be quite difficult. I don't think it's going to be super difficult in this chart because Pluto's trining Mercury and the moon is forming, Pluto's trining Mercury and the moon is forming a grand trine. So there may be emotional domination issues. He could be dominated, or he could dominate somebody else. But there's a lot of empathy here with all 3 planets in Pisces, and it's trining the moon itself. I'm suspecting that any emotional domination in this situation would come from him being very, very persuasive and dominating almost in kind of a, what's the term, a velvet chains. Dominating a person by making them really want the idea of being dominated, by being charming, by being able to read into who they are and how they process stuff. So now I'm going to add the minor aspects, which I put in with the dotted lines. The green dotted lines are sextiles. So we're finding another escape route for that Neptune square. We can go sextile down to Mercury. We can sextile down to Pluto. So there's a spiritual side to him. It might misfire sometimes because of the square, but I don't think it's going to be a really difficult problem for that. We also have 2 quincunxes or inconjuncts. These are the only non-Ptolemaic aspects I will use of the quincunx. And he's got so many other strong aspects. The quincunx are a little weaker here. Pluto is quincunxing the sun, and Neptune is quincunxing the moon. And as someone once put it, planets that are quincunx each other, it's almost like somebody's handcuffed 2 people together who don't even speak the same language. So these planets will have trouble understanding each other, but they're going to try to work together for most of his life, and they just may be wandering around the dark and bumping into each other sometimes, but they will touch each other every now and then. So there's a spiritual quality to his moon that can come through, and there's a transformative quality to Pluto, to the sun, that helps him grow. So we have all the aspects shown in the chart, and this is where I take it to the next step. I write 5 words on the chart in red, and you just saw them pop up. And to get a closer look at them, these are the words or the categories I put on the chart when I'm looking at it: career, relationships, health, family, and finances. Career includes public image and your status in the world. Relationships are all one-to-one relationships, whether they're lovers or spouses or partners or business partners or close personal friends. Health, well, that's health. That's pretty clear. Family can include home and parents, of course, and even siblings to a degree. And finances, well, clearly finances are finances. It's something we all have, what we need, what we treasure, what our worth is. So it isn't always money. It's but what the things that we have, that we possess, whether they are skills or not. And then what I do is under every place where I put the subtopic, I then put all the glyphs and patterns I can think of that relate to that particular topic. So now we're really getting into the meat and potatoes of a person's chart, and we'll get in a close-up on these. So under career, I put Uranus is in Sag on the midheaven, and Neptune is in the 10th house also. So we've got a Uranian quality to his career, a changing quality, a cutting edge quality, an open quality. It's in Sag. And yet we've got Neptune in there too. So this suggests that Neptune is involved in some way in his career. We could talk art, we could talk music, we could talk film, we could talk spirituality, we could talk drugs, are all possible career qualities that will be brought into this unusual cutting edge career. Now with careers, I always look to Mars, because Mars is how we take action. And Mars is how we do our work. Now his is in Pisces, so whatever he's doing with his career, I think is going to involve some sort of persuasion, some sort of tuning into the people, so to speak. Pisces being, of course, the sign of the entire world. We have to remember it's also conjunct the Sun and Venus in Pisces. So all three of these are going to work in some sort of charming, persuasive way in his career in particular. I put GT there because that just stands for Grand Trine. It doesn't stand for Greenwich Mean Time, just to remind me that there's a Grand Trine in this chart. And his North Node, his evolutionary path, is in the 6th house, which is the house of service, and it's in Leo. So he's going to get a lot of growth out of being serving other people in a notice me way. You notice it's him. We're not talking about somebody serving and disappearing into the background. We're talking about somebody that needs a little bit of ego quality to recognize, like, I'm doing this and it matters. Even though he's got all this sensitivity with his Pisces and he tunes into people, you can't let go of him. He's got to be strong, and he's serving people and be noticed. So we'll take it to the relationship. So what do we throw in there? What's on the 7th house cusp is in Leo. Once again, he's looking to be noticed. His moon, his emotional side, is in Cancer. He's going to be a nurturer emotionally in any close relationship that he's in. And I prefer the term nurture for Cancer and not mother or mothering, because mothering carries a little too much baggage. And really, mothering is about nurturing, ideally, regardless of who does the mothering. And so he's got a nurturing quality in a relationship. Again, going back to the Pisces, the Venus and the Mars are conjunct. So the physical and the emotional sides of a relationship are both in Pisces, conjunct each other. This is a person who probably relates well to both men and women, and can kind of, this is not going to be a person who's, I think, going to be too insensitive. I mean, with all this Pisces going on, he's tuning into whoever he's in a relationship with. And the worst he's going to do is that, well, there it is, the moon, squaring Pluto. There's going to be a certain amount of kind of domination going on here. But this is a gentle guy. This is not a person where I'm seeing a lot of like hard ass, pushiness. So, and again, the moon is part of that Grand Trine. So there's, again, a very harmonious energy coming into relationships. Family. Once again, some wonderful stuff. The Sun is trining Moon. That tells me that mother and father are in harmony, or, well, they're in harmony when you're conceived. That's often what Sun trine Moon means. And Sun trine Moon also means that the person sees their parents as being harmonious together in some way, shape, or form. So he has a nice sense of his family being kind of harmonious in some way. He's got the Mars and Venus, and of course the whole thing pulled into the Grand Trine with Uranus. So a flexible, unusual family. I didn't write this over here in red, but His nadir is Gemini, so he's got kind of an active intellectual family. And once again, the moon squaring Pluto is coming in here. So persuasiveness, there may be some problems with mom, but they seem kind of softened. If there's any problems with mom, it may be she just might be a little overbearing, like, you know, did you have enough to eat? Are you dressed warmly enough? Kind of an overbearing quality of like taking care of you as opposed to perhaps dominating you and forcing you to their will, so to speak. And health. Well, we have a Sun conjunct Mars, as we know, and Sun conjunct Mars gives you a certain amount of vitality and a certain amount of kind of vigorous quality to you. It is squaring Neptune, which can sort of soften it a little bit. But again, we're talking squaring Neptune to a Pisces, so it's not an alien presence. I would suspect that most of his illnesses come from some sort of an emotional base and a spiritual problem. Neptune squaring Mars telling me the spiritual issues, the moon telling me the emotional side. The moon is in the 6th house of health in Cancer. So what he eats is going to be very important to him. He should definitely not eat when he is emotionally upset. It will cause issues for him. He may struggle at times emotionally. He may overeat a bit because it makes him temporarily feel good. So digestive issues are probably the biggest risk in this kind of a situation with these planets. And finally, finances. His Mars is in Pisces in the 2nd house. It sort of tips over into the 2nd house from the 1st house. So he's kind of aggressive about his finances, but in kind of an empathetic, tuned-in way. He's got Sun conjunct Venus, which also brings a certain amount of financial benefits. So that matters. And finally, I didn't mark it down here, but Jupiter and Saturn are both conjunct in the 8th house of other people's money. So he probably should do fairly well using other people's money. So that's kind of in a nutshell how I've gotten into this chart. And I'm going to go back now to the chart itself and tell you who this person is. I know him quite well. He's been a member of my family for about 10, 12 years now. And he is indeed a very charming guy. He will not shut up. His Mercury is in the 1st house at 27 degrees Aquarius. He is interesting regardless. Everybody likes this guy. He's compassionate, he's caring, he's sensitive. So you've got, again, that Venus conjunct the Sun, and his Mars is conjunct the Sun also. So there's kind of a persuasive, loving quality. When he gives you a ride to the store because you need a ride, you make it feel like you're making him happy to do it. You know, there's this kind of persuasive, empathetic quality to let him drive you to the store. He does have some weight issues. He does have some stomach issues coming up. They're not getting out of hand. He's seeing a doctor. He's trying to deal with them and work through them. His career. He is an executive in a pharmaceutical company, and he works with the team that introduces new drugs. He does the marketing for them. So you have somebody coming up working with new concepts, Uranus on the midheaven, introducing new concepts in an expansive kind of a way. Neptune's in there, so well, drugs are involved. As we know, Neptune can rule drugs. And we have an Aquarius rising, so there's a scientific bent to the whole thing. And that Uranus is tied into the whole grand trine. So again, healing other people. He's a very genuine, he's an executive that wants to get good drugs out there to help people. Yeah, the bottom line matters to him, and he does have a nice salary, and he takes care of himself financially. That's the 2nd house stuff. But he's got a genuine heart. He's not just sitting there trying to figure out what drugs can we stuff on people, but what are these things that can actually help people? How do we market it? Who would really need these drugs? These are all qualities that matter to him in a very important way, that Piscean, Neptunian, cutting-edge kind of drug company connection. His relationship, his wife is, he's like the perfect husband, and I use quotes around that, but he is very empathetic, he's understanding, he's very supportive. He's a really lovely father. He's very connected to the kids. He communicates with them. So there's kind of a real emotional connected quality in all the relationships he's in. I did mention the Saturn and Jupiter in the 8th house. He's in charge of the budgets and other people's money and how they apply them and how they can use them to market the drugs. So again, that quality comes through of using other people's money and knowing how to handle it in a Jupiter-Saturn kind of controlled growth way. And the family he came out of, very active intellectual people, very busy home, kind of a robust, offbeat nature. It's an unusual family, but not that weird, but there's a lot of connection. The brothers and the siblings and the parents and everybody all get along fairly well, if a little offbeat and unusual. So that pretty much kind of really takes you into his chart. I start with, as I said, let's go back and I'll just go over this real quick. And then after this quick thing, we'll talk questions about it first. Highlight the holy three, the sun, the moon, and the rising sign. It begins to take you into who this person is at the basic core of who they are. Look to the conjunctions. These become powerful. They kind of amp up together when you've got 3 planets functioning together. It's supercharged in some way. Even 2 planets together add energy to it that you won't immediately see in the sun, moon, and rising sign connection. Add in the positive aspects, and you're seeing how things flow back and forth in a healthy kind of a way. I always look to this first to see how you can maximize what you've got, you know. And then we add in the difficult aspects, so we find where the trouble can be and where it needs to be worked on and solved. Minor aspects, it gives you some of the details, and then, of course, after the nuances are done, career, relationships, health, family, finances, and you've got the person, and you've got a pretty good handle on who they are. And as you talk to them, of course, they'll fill it out for you. So that is chart number 1 and how I go into the chart. Any questions, of course, are welcome. You can ask questions about the chart in particular, but the goal is understanding how you can pull this out of a chart as in a focused way that helps you see a person and not just a collection of quirks and traits. So fire when ready if you have any questions.
Yeah, Anthony, it's Linda here. You referred to the inconjunct as being non-plomaic, a non-plomaic aspect. Could you please explain that?
Yeah, Ptolemy, the Greek philosopher, Pto, L-M-E-Y, I believe it's pronounced. He identified the opposition, the square, the trine, and the sextile, and the conjunction as aspects. He never addressed quincunxes. So when I say that I only use the Ptolemaic aspects, I would leave quincunxes out. Quincunxes were not created by Ptolemy, P-T-O-L-M-E-Y, so it's a non-Ptolemaic aspect. It's not as traditional as far back as the other aspects are. That's what I meant.
Great, thank you.
Oh, no problem at all. Sorry.
Hi, this is Sarah.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey, do you ever go into the nodal axis in your readings?
You're referring to South Node, North Node?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did mention this one in particular, that it's in the house of service, and his growth is going to come through serving other people, but in a way that you have to recognize it's him, because it's in Leo. It's kind of interesting because he's in a very Aquarian kind of a career, and yet he will grow and evolve the most by acknowledging the opposite of Aquarius, which is Leo, acknowledging that his ego is important, which is a challenge for him. He's got all this Pisces, so he's more than inclined to be very accommodating, and it's a bit of a struggle for him at times to be have that strong Leo kind of look at me quality. So in his particular chart, I see him as needing to learn more in the direction of look at me. I'm the one doing this job. It's not just anybody doing this job. And even if he's doing the helping and doing the Aquarian and the Piscean thing, he should do it from like an ego. And I don't think the word ego is bad. From an egotistical point of view, like notice that it's me.
Right.
You know, so that's how I see the nodal stuff going on here is what I see there.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
My pleasure. So.
Yeah, Anthony, why is Mars square Neptune, your opinion, a spiritual issue? You mentioned that earlier. Are you saying that Mars is not spiritual?
No, not necessarily, but because it's a square, um, sometimes it can be a misfiring of the spiritual side. Like you may take action that is not spiritually aligned, and as a result, it can become a problem because you might think you're doing something good and you're not. You're not being spiritual at all. That's I find the biggest risk of a Neptune square is that it misfires the spiritual side of things. You may get caught up instead in idealism. Um, so there's an idealistic quality of wanting to cure everybody and take care of everybody and take action to make everybody well. But there may be limitations to what he can do that he doesn't always see as a result because he wants to cure everybody. And you can't necessarily do that. If Mars was trining Neptune, you'd have much more harmonious spiritual action. Whereas here, there's a risk of sometimes misfiring. You could look at it as drugs that aren't launched, drugs that are not given approval by the FDA. In his particular case, in another person's life, you could just find that they go down a spiritual path that doesn't work for them. They may try yoga and it just doesn't do it for them, or they may try the I Ching or whatever, and it doesn't connect for them. And they take a while to find I hate to use the word correct, the most harmonious spiritual path for them may take a while to find when Neptune is confusing Mars activity, because Neptune can be confusing.
Thank you, Anthony. And my last question is, what kinds of advice do you give clients when they encounter really difficult experiences in their lives according to this chart?
Well, in this particular chart, I might turn to them and say, you've got a bit of a dreamer quality to you. You're very idealistic. You can get carried away with that. And I would say to stay more focused on what he can accomplish, which is he's quite capable of swaying people and encouraging people and bringing about qualities that are more helpful. I might say be careful with your tendency to dominate other people, because you can become this is not meant to be a bad joke. You could become a dominating mother, an aggressive mother, with Pluto squaring the moon, even if you're doing it with velvet chains. So I may say step back a little bit and make sure you let people find their own self. I'd say, hey, tune into your Pisces stuff and try to move away from that Pluto square the moon, and maybe use that instead to evolve out of your own emotional situation where you may find problems. If he's having trouble with diet in his 6th house, he may need to go to Pluto and analyze the past and the deepest part of who he is to find out where these emotional eating issues came from. So I always point people in the direction of the more harmonious aspects and say, your strength is over here. Can you apply it onto the challenging aspect?
That's excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, hi, Anthony.
Hi.
Carly here. You mentioned that Mercury and Mars are in a conjunction, guilty by association.
Well, yeah, Venus. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Venus it is.
Yeah.
What's your orb? What's the maximum degrees for an orb?
I'm a little conservative. For any of the major aspects, square, conjunction, opposition, and trine, I stick to about 7 degrees maximum. And with the sextiles, it's about 5 degrees. And with the quincunxes, I go to about 3 degrees max. I might sometimes fudge it a little bit for the sun or the moon. What happened to me is years ago, I went up in the sky and somebody said the moon was like conjunct Jupiter at 10 degrees. And I found Jupiter and I found the moon, and they were so far apart in the sky that I just felt 10 degrees was way too much to actually consider something being able to affect each other. So I keep it to a 7 degrees max. So some people might say that Venus and the Mars are conjunct because they're only 10 degrees apart, but I'm thinking that's a little wide, and I'm glad the sun is there to sort of like pull them together into the guilt by association.
Great, thank you. And what housing system do you use?
Oh, I'm bad with that. I'll use Coke. I'll use Alcabetus sometimes. I have a tendency to, in my personal viewpoint, anytime I see a house cusp, I always assume it's about 10 degrees wide, because they change so much from system to system, which is why the reason I really accent the angles so much, because the midheaven is always the midheaven. I don't care what system you're using. And the ascendant is always the ascendant, regardless of what system you're using. So those I know are concrete and I can put my hands on. But in the case of, in this chart in particular, the moon looks like it's just in the 6th house. You go to another system, it might suddenly be in the 5th house. So I take those between the angles cusps as kind of a thick black line and have a little fudging room there.
Great,
But,
thank you.
ideally, Coke or Aquabetus is what I use. So, if there aren't any other questions, I can move to the next chart, but that's up to the assembled multitudes here. Okay, I'm going to move to the next chart, and we can always come back to this if we're at the end, but okay. I'm going to share. I hope I'm doing this right. Okay, let me close this one out. Okay, you should all see a new chart now with the letter B on it. And I apologize, this chart is of one of the first 5 people I ever did a reading for. This drawing is 32 years old, so I didn't bother to redraw it, so it's a little different looking than the current way I draw charts. But once again, I copied it by hand and did the aspect carrying by hand, and then step 1, I highlight the sun and the moon and the rising sign. So we've got an Aries. He's got a sun at 7 degrees Aries. So we've got kind of a willful person, a kind of a person who's sort of very direct and does kind of what he wants to do. But his moon is in Scorpio. So his emotions are going to be strong, but not necessarily always be displayed or expressed right away. So his motives may remain hidden as he's being a very direct kind of an Aries. But he's got Gemini rising. There's a chatty quality, an intellectual quality up front. So there's a chatty and personable kind of quality in his Aries energy, regardless of his hidden Scorpio moon. So the next step, as I always do, is I circle the conjunctions. And oh boy, Pluto at 12 degrees Leo is conjunct Saturn at 16 degrees Leo, is conjunct Mars at 18 degrees Leo. All of them are on a fixed sign, and they're all conjunct the nadir. This is quite a nut to crack. You've got Saturn conjunct Mars, which is good for focused action. Sometimes it can slow you down, but sometimes it can keep you at a good and even pace. But with Pluto there, I always consider Pluto sort of like adding nuclear energy to any kind of energy going on there. So you've got this very powerful ability for self-control. It's very ego-based. It's in Leo, but Saturn and Mars are conjunct Pluto. Pluto conjunct Mars, your self-control is astonishing, if not locked down. And I'm saying if not locked down because I'm looking at, they're all fixed signs and 2 of them are retro. So I'm seeing somebody who might have some odd qualities with flexibility. So the next thing I do is I add the harmonious aspect. And well, that's it. We've got Sun trine Pluto. Okay, if you've got to have only one harmonious aspect with that nut at the bottom, that little stellium, Sun trine Pluto is not bad. You've got the potential there to transform yourself in a harmonious way. Sun trine Pluto is very good in any kind of evolutionary growth because Pluto is very good, like the symbolism of Scorpio. Pluto is about the phoenix rising from its own ashes. So you have a quality of somebody that's capable of taking it to the next level whenever he has to, and he may need some help with that thing at the bottom, the stellium of Pluto, Saturn, and Mars. So then we add the so-called difficult aspects. Oh boy. Right off the bat, we've got a T-square. The moon is opposite Venus, and then it's squaring that thing at the bottom. So you've got a lot of this tension at the bottom, and it's going up and it's squaring a Scorpio moon. So he's not going to be particularly emotionally expressive at all. Saturn square the moon. He may have some anger issues. Mars square the moon. But the moon itself is opposite Venus in Taurus in the 12th house. We're running into somebody here that has a lot of trouble relating to other people. Moon opposite Venus is going to be my feelings versus your feelings. The Scorpio moon is already kind of holding him back. Venus is in the 12th house, so he's not even 100% sure of his relationships. Venus in the 12th house is also about hidden love or hidden relationships, love that isn't just quite put out into the open for one reason or another. It could be many, many reasons. So he's got these problems. Venus is also is squaring Saturn, it's squaring Pluto, and it's squaring Mars. So again, we're having a real tension in his ability to relate to people. We want to take it into family areas, and we've got the moon. Moon is mom, and it's squaring Pluto, and it's squaring Saturn and Mars. You've got mom who may anger you, mom who may restrict you, mom who may dominate you, mom who may affect how you relate to people for the rest of your life. He does have the benefit of that trine getting out of the stellium and up into the sun. So dad's a possibility. Dad might be some help here, because Saturn is trining, widely trining, guilt by association, the sun. So there's a good quality there. But then we go to the hard aspect. He's got sun opposite Neptune. Dad is not going to be as present as he would probably like. Dad may be helpful in some ways, but he also may be unavailable in some ways. Neptune opposite the sun could suggest an alcoholic father. It could suggest just a distant father that you can't quite connect with, or it could suggest a father that's not there a lot. Maybe he's a traveling salesman and he's only there part of the time. The other opposition, I had to draw them a little squiggly there. They should be straight lines, but I'm sure it's not difficult to follow, is Jupiter is opposite Uranus, from Jupiter in the 7th house to Uranus in the 1st house. So he's a bit offbeat. He gets benefits from relationships. Oh boy, but he's having trouble with relationships. So he's got, when he gets into them, they become beneficial, but it may be a struggle for him to form relationships in general. So let's add in some of the lesser aspects. Now we've got, well, Neptune is sextile Pluto, and basically I think everyone born from 1950 on has got Neptune sextile Pluto. But in this particular case, it's actually forming a yod with Mercury up on the other side as the apex of the yod up in the 10th house in Pisces. So usually that's the key figure. Communication is a key figure to help him through the yod. It could probably help him bring out his spiritual and transformative side more, the more he can learn to communicate in an empathetic Mercury and Pisces kind of way. He's also got the quincunx between Uranus and the moon. So again, there's going to be a bit of a struggle to express emotions. Remember, the planets are handcuffed together and have nothing in common. So his offbeat side and his emotional side may struggle with each other. And finally, Uranus is sextiling that whole bundle down at the bottom, Mars in particular. That's helpful. It'll actually help bring about some sort of action that, whereas maybe offbeat, it will at least be harmonious in some way, shape, or form. So then we add the 5 magic words: career, relationship, health, family, and finances. And let's step a little bit closer. Career, he has an Aquarian career. It's on his midheaven. So we're talking about an unusual career of some kind, because it's Aquarian, perhaps in service in some way to the world, because that's the Aquarian kind of energy. But his moon is in Scorpio in the 6th house of work, service, and health, and part of that T-square. So we're not, the other guy, the previous chart had the moon in the 6th house, but it was in Cancer. So there's a nurturing quality, but there's still a nurturing quality. It's the moon in the 6th house, but it's in Scorpio. And this is a person who wants to help people on a much deeper level than just nurturing them. This is more of kind of a healing, being reborn kind of quality that he's bringing to people. And yet, as much as he wants to do this service to people, it's opposite Venus and Taurus, and it's turning into a T-square. And there's a tremendous struggle to try to relate to other people. And as long as we're talking about career, I look to Mars again, because it's how we take action. His is in Leo. So he's a good kind of fiery worker. He'll get stuff done. He'll bring enthusiasm to anything he decides to do. Excuse me, sorry. The Saturn is conjunct Venus, and I have, excuse me, Mars. Saturn is conjunct Mars. I have Saturn conjunct Mars in Scorpio. It can be difficult, but the one interesting thing is once a person with Saturn conjunct Mars figures out how they're going to do something, you can't talk them out of it. There's a quality of like, I've figured it out and I'm going to do it, and this is how I'm going to do it. Add in Pluto, which, as I said, is like adding some nuclear power to it. This is a person that when they've decided they're going to do something, you're not going to talk them out of it, and they're going to do it their way. And then finally, in terms of life path, his North Node's in Taurus. in the house of the subconscious. So there's I think a desire here to find himself away from the Scorpio passionate intensity and find a sort of peace, a Taurian peace in the subconscious kind of a way. He can put his spirituality in his 12th house at rest somehow. He will evolve and grow a lot more than getting caught up very passionately in emotional stuff. Relationships, well, we already know he's got a lot of problems with that. And yet he has Jupiter in Sag in the 7th house. So benefits come to him via partnerships and relationships. Even if it is opposite Uranus and Gemini, so there may be some crazy new ideas that come his way. His weirdness may give grief to connecting to other people, or connecting to other people, their weirdness may get to him. He may have trouble if people don't behave just the right kind of a way for him. He gets benefits from it. But again, the issue is that T-square. He's got Venus opposite the moon, how you relate to people opposite his own emotional state, and squaring that intense Mars and Leo in the bundle at the bottom. So Venus is happy. It's in Taurus, but it's in the 12th house. So it's not readily accessible to him. So there's a lot of tension, again, created in the relationships. But once he manages to make a relationship, it actually becomes fairly beneficial to him. Health-wise, the only thing really, we're having the moon is back in the house of health, like the previous chart. But in his case, it's in Scorpio. And his diet is very important to him in some way, shape, or form, in a very passionate kind of a level. His health is also based, because not only is the moon in there, it's in Scorpio. His emotional state is very connected to his health in many ways. So that's something he has to watch for. His emotional suppression of emotion can lead to health problems. So, and what else we got here? Family. Okay, this is a rough one. Mom has the potential to be a major problem, and I don't see a lot of escape in the chart from mom at first. He's got the opposite to Venus, so mom is giving him difficulty relating to people. It's squaring Mars. Mom makes him angry. Mom makes him suppressed. Mom kind of dominates him emotionally. And dad is not really coming through as well as he could. He may get some stuff from dad, but dad in some way is inhibited or limited from actually coming through in a way that is particularly helpful to him. Okay, and finances is second house is in Cancer. There's not a lot else in there. I will say I know this gentleman. I've known him for years. He is about as Cancerianly financial. I don't know if that's a word or not. He's cheap. He's thrifty. When I first got to know him, he was living on like a third of the amount of wages that most of our friends were. I don't know how he did it, but he knew a way to focus and to save money. So he's got money. He's not rich, but he's always got money when he needs it. So let's go back and we'll look at that chart, and I'll give you an idea of who this person, how he manifested this stuff. This is a friend of mine. I've known him close to 40 years. He was one of my first victims when I did grab people and said, let me do your astrology chart reading. And he became so stunned by his astrology reading that he started studying astrology. And we actually learned astrology together. But he was much more diligent than I was. So let's look at this bundle at the bottom and how it affected him. I once showed this chart to another astrologer, kind of like, hey, look at this. And I remember the other astrologer said, is he a terrorist? I said, not that I know of. But what he was looking at was this suppression at the bottom that has the potential for exploding. Mars is conjunct Saturn, and Pluto is in there energizing it. You have stunning self-control, okay? Yet he's got kind of a curiosity about the world. His Mercury is in Pisces, his midheaven is in Aquarius. So the first thing he does in college is he studies to become sort of a cultural anthropologist. And in order to do this, he has to go and live in Southeast Asia for about 6 months and report to like a Margaret Mead kind of report. And he learns Javanese. to get over there. So a language he's learned, talk about obscure communication. Once again, communicating with other people and forming relationships is made difficult. He picks a language that is the least direct language I have ever heard of. In Javanese, if it's cold and the window is open, you would never turn to the person and say, let's close the window if the room is cold. You would say, I've noticed the room is feeling cold. A little while later, do you think the room is feeling cold? Do you think we should build a fire or perhaps close the window? I've been thinking of closing the window, and then eventually the window gets closed. There's no direct way. So we have a person who has trouble relating to people, picking a language that is about as indirect as possible to do cultural anthropology. But that doesn't really work out for him. He gets the degree, but he comes back to the United States, and he then decides to study to be a mime. Mimes, which are all about physical control. If you've ever met a person who's a professional mime, even when they're not on performance, there's a precision about their actions. They put their teacup down just so. They handle things just so. There's a precision to the way they walk and sit. So we've got the Saturn conjunct Mars, amazing self-control. Pluto hasn't been added in yet. The career is a mime. He plays it a bit. He doesn't get too far. So what does he end up becoming? A master yoga teacher. So he now teaches other people how to control themselves in a transformative way, which is the evolution of Pluto. You study yoga and you do it right, and you learn this sort of self-control, and you get sort of a spiritual connection, and you evolve into, ideally, a higher plane. His sun is over in the 11th house, so he's leading group goals as an Aryan. There's a strong compassionate quality he has. He has little workshops, and if you're not even going to get into yoga, he'll show you yoga exercise for your feet, yoga exercises for your knees if you're having issues with them, having wrist problems. There's certain yoga exercises you can use. So he's really teaching people how to control themselves in a healing spiritual way, and which I find kind of certainly playing out his chart in the best possible way. He did, by the way, eventually use the Javanese as a career thing, because we live in New York, and he would be called by the UN when Javanese businessmen would come into town and they wanted to communicate with American businessmen. Well, his Mercury in Pisces comes through here perfectly. He's serving as kind of the ocean for these two people to communicate across to each other. So there's a nice connection there. His Uranus opposite Jupiter and his Neptune opposite his Sun is bringing in all the astrology that he does, because he's also a professional astrological counselor while being this yoga instructor. I do want to mention that self-control. He was the one that did all the math and did all the detailed work, and I would share in it as we were studying astrology. From what I know about his relationships, and it's funny, I've known the guy almost 40 years, and he's been with this woman for 30 of them, and I know nothing about their relationship. I kind of know her. If I meet her on the street, I can say hello, but everything is hidden. It's like Venus in the 12th house. If you ever ask, hey, how are you and what's your name doing? He'll like, well, things are working out well, and then it just drops there. So this is kind of hidden quality. I know he gets a lot of benefits out of being in a relationship with her, but I don't know what they are, because he doesn't share them. So we have that Venus in there kind of hidden. Ideally, he finds a way to really work through transformation with that nut at the bottom, and he can go into the 12th house and meet up with his North Node in Taurus and find some sort of peace there. Parents, I don't want to forget about the parents. His mother was an untreated manic depressive. His father basically tried to, let's all keep mom calm. Let's all like make sure we don't upset mom. So he kind of lay down in front of this manic depressive woman who wasn't getting the treatment she needed. And all of the kids learn to suppress themselves on one level or another, because if you express yourself too much, mom's going to go crazy. Mom's going to be, go into one of her manic states. And so all of the children felt responsible for mom's emotional welfare, which is certainly unfair, but it certainly shows up in Pluto and Saturn and Mars squaring a moon in Scorpio and opposing Venus in his chart. So mom was an issue and a powerful issue. And dad, although he was supportive and he connected to his dad tended to think that the solution was to appease mom in some way, and somehow that would help what was essentially a medical illness that should have been treated. But if you look at the date on this chart, this person was born in 1948, so we're talking mid-50s. I don't think manic depressive was understood as well as it is now, and so the family took less than the healthiest possible avenues to deal with the problem at hand. Oh, and he's the first vegetarian I ever met back in 1980. So his health issues were always very important. He eats very precise food. He's not into junk food. He eats he was doing macrobiotic and vegetarian, so that moon in the 6th house for his own health also turns up. And curiously enough, because it's the square to the Saturn and the Mars, most of his diet consists of things that he doesn't eat, and a very focused kind of elimination of things until he gets to a precise diet that he likes. So that is the story of chart number B. Again, working in through the Holy Three, Sun, Moon, and Rising, and then slowly bringing it out. And I find what's really useful is the categories and putting all the planetary aspects under each set of category to give you a picture of that particular part of their life. Because career, relationships, health, family, and finances kind of covers almost anything a person is going to ask you about in a chart reading. So fire when ready. Any questions that you come up with, I'll try my very best to field them. Excuse me.
Anthony, I'd like to know, how do you view retrogrades in the chart, especially in this one?
Well, in this one, I find him pretty important because he's already got a real hot bundle down there, and the retrogrades are pulling them backwards. I think he in this particular case, he got too into self-control. He got too into the Saturn and Plutonian stuff at first, and was, when I first met him, although personable with the Gemini rising, a very stiff and kind of driven person. And I think he needed to overcome the retrogrades first before he could even really start taking action. So in this particular chart, I think those retrogrades and that combination is more difficult. His Neptune is also retrograde, but I don't look at retrograde Neptune as that powerfully one way or the other. The outer planets, except that this one happens, Pluto happens to be conjunct Saturn and Mars. The outer planet retrogrades I take with a grain of salt because they're retrograde almost half the year anyway. But in his case, I think it really it took him a while to get started and get going with things. Maybe he began to open up by the beginning of his first Saturn return. Shortly after it was over, by the time transiting Saturn got to like maybe 22 degrees Leo, he finally began to open that thing up a bit in the bottom. I think astrology helped him a lot look at his own family and himself. So that's how I see it in this particular chart.
I had another question as well. Do you look for repeating themes, or what would be a repeating theme to you if you do that?
Well, and what happens, example, in both of these charts, as I go through all the connections, I start seeing things that show up again and again. In this chart, the ability to relate to people is stymied at every turn. You know, he's got Venus in Taurus. It's wonderful. You should be able to relate to people, but it's in the 12th house, and it's opposite the moon in Scorpio, which is secretive to a degree emotionally, and it's squaring Saturn. So I'm seeing this theme throughout this chart of struggling to relate to other people, and crossing that barrier and feeling comfortable enough. He's got the Saturn. You know, the thing about that nugget at the bottom of the chart is it's a big influence on his innermost self. He's got Saturn right at the heart of who he is, even if it's conjunct Mars, and he's got Pluto right at the bottom nadir of who he is, which suggests, again, a very restrictive childhood. And then as a result, he carries it into forward in his life. So this restrictiveness and held backness, the theme is all over this chart of holding back. Even though he's got the quality of transformation and he began to learn how to work with it, his ability to relate to other people has been a struggle. And I think him becoming a master yoga teacher and having workshops has really kind of forced him out there to listen to people, to be empathetic, which he has some of it in his chart, and help them heal themselves. So I think that's been a big help for him in terms of working through his problems. Or in the previous chart, there was so much empathy in the chart and so much emotional openness that becomes a big theme in his chart. So whenever you see the same thing repeated, Venus opposite the moon, the trouble interrelating, Venus square Saturn, trouble in moon square Saturn, you start seeing the piling up of certain traits. Empathy isn't as strong in this chart because it's got Mercury in Pisces, but a lot of the rest of it is really kind of not open to other people. But it is there and it can be cultivated. So in this chart, it'd be very easy to say, oh, trouble relating to people, but there's things that he can tap into. So that's how I kind of find the building up of traits in a chart.
Would you say that, when I look at that Leo stellium and then the square, the nodes, it looks like a lot of violence to me, either past life violence, current life family violence, extreme fear of expressing, one's nature, one's creativity, and then squaring the moon, a lot of rage and anger at his mother, but also his own emotional challenges.
Yeah, I always find this sentence kind of amusing. He's better now. He wasn't particularly violent towards other people. I did find that his ability to be angry was very stifled when I first got to know him. But it would come out in strange ways, like when he had root canal done and he was like livid with anger, about the whole thing. And I thought that's interesting, that's where he chose to express his emotions. He didn't have the outlet. His oldest brother died when he was 8 years old, and none of the kids got to mourn the loss of their sibling because mom was what was the only emotion that mattered. So there has been a real frustration for him learning to express it. He's gotten better. He's never going to be effusive, but he has steered a lot of his anger into, like I say, the mime, the yoga, taking physical activity in a way that kind of builds on the Mars without turning it into rage. But I do think that's what made my fellow astrologer ask me if this is the chart of a terrorist, because exactly what you're talking about. There's a potential for tremendous nuclear catastrophe in this chart.
Right, or the fear of actually expressing.
Yes.
The Mars expressing the Pluto, and there's desire to move forward. Then there's repression. I mean, Pluto and Mars together, that's really intense. Then add Saturn, it's really powerful.
Yeah, and
yeah, I mean, when you can master it, then
now he's a master
that's really
yoga
beautiful. Yeah, right.
And he did start with the mime thing, but I think that being a mime left out the Pluto quality. It was good for self-control, but then what do you do? How are you evolving and healing by being a mime? But you are doing that when he moved into yoga with it instead. Now he's helping other people evolve, and he's evolving himself. So yoga, I think, has been a godsend to this particular chart. He could have done Tai Chi. He could have done, any physical, spiritual connection, karate, any of those things. But he opted with yoga, and it seems to work very well for him. So yeah, it's quite a chart. It's one of the reasons I showed it, because it is almost alarming at first when I first look at it. So.
Anthony?
Yes.
This is Sue. Do you look at the rulerships of, say, I noticed that the all of that stuff down at the bottom of his chart is ruled by his sun in Aries.
Right.
So could you speak a little bit to that?
Well, yeah, those are some of the nuances. I do consider them. I think the fact that the sun is ruling everything down in that stellium at the bottom, and then the fact that the sun is trining into the stellium is actually giving him a nice pathway to grow and evolve. I think the fact that he's became a master yoga instructor, which is, I think, that stellium at the bottom kind of becoming a career, and then the fact that he teaches, which takes you back up into his sun in the 11th house. So now he's got these group goals. He forms yoga classes. He works with a yoga institute here in New York. So there's this kind of social organization, which the 11th house is about, that he connects with in an Aryan kind of a way. Aryan as in Aries. That I think that's really been a great help for him to have that trine. So there is, yes, that smooths the connection there, very much so. I think the fact that his rising ruler of his ascendant is Mercury in Pisces, and he's used it as a translator and in a career kind of way. He also, by the way, edits. He's known to proofread and edit as a freelancer. So that's something else that brings that Mercury into play there. So yeah, I think the rulerships matter, and they either reinforce or pull back from it. In the case of the sun with the Leo, there's a real reinforcement because the trine's connecting them, and it gives them a nice path. Just take all those 3 planets and travel down that trine into the 11th house and teach those people and lead those people, and it gives him an outlet for it. So yes, I definitely think that matters. I also think it's interesting that his moon, the rulership of his moon, Scorpio, is Pluto, down in that stellium. So he's got, that stellium is important because it brings in a lot of the rulerships of other planets and moves it along. So yes, I use rulerships in a reinforcing kind of a way, is the best way to describe it, if that makes sense.
That's great. Thank you.
I was wondering if you work with interception, because the moon in Scorpio opposed to Venus and Taurus are both intercepted.
Yeah, I don't mess with interceptions too much. As I mentioned earlier, I tend to take house cusps very, very loosely. This chart is so early, it's probably in Placidus or Placidus. I don't know how it's actually pronounced, but I always go with the angles as the most important, and I take all the house cusps, the 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 6th, 8th, 9th, 11th, and 12th very loosely, because they change so much from system to system that I consider the house cups kind of a thick bar. So I don't put a lot of stock in interception per se. In this particular case, if you do want to look at it, it's obviously giving even more grief to his T-square. But he hasn't become a serial killer. So I think he's working with it, you know.
Okay, Anthony, if you could please click on stop share.
Okay. It has been stopped.
Great, thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. Would you all please thank Anthony Picco, everyone?
Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you,
Anthony.
Wonderful, Anthony. Thank you.
My pleasure. You're all very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Okay. By the way, just as a quick commercial for myself, I have a Monday night radio show on the internet called Cosmic Tuesdays. I interview astrologers, psychics, all kinds of metaphysical people. So if you want to email me or Google it, you can join me on Monday evenings on the internet and hear a lot of different metaphysical people talk about what they've learned and practiced.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My pleasure. So,
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Anthony.
okay. Thank you very much. Always fun. Take care.